Well, good morning, everybody. I am in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and as I landed last night and grabbed an Uber to the hotel, I snapped a picture right outside the airport of the local WSR 88D radar. And it's kind of a storied radar because of some of the observations it's made of some massive hurricanes that have come through the Gulf. And this particular one was destroyed back when, in 2020, late August 2020, when Hurricane Laura went over the top. Now, it's kind of interesting. When I was driving past this, there was also some very large thunderstorms. I didn't grab a picture. I should have of the big storm that was right over here, but you can see it on satellite. Yesterday afternoon, there was actually a local area of high pressure sitting and spinning right here in this part of Texas, but I'm over here in Lake Charles, and you can see some of the deep convection, some of the storms that popped yesterday. I'm going to come back to this in a few minutes because some of these storms are pretty nasty up north. They put down some locally heavy rain here along the Mississippi Valley, but very, very spotty. This was not widespread coverage. And there's more going on to this satellite animation than that I want to teach to you here in a few minutes. But I was just thinking about Hurricane Laura because my Uber driver brought up, how bad of a hurricane it was and how people still have not returned to the area after this hurricane. So since you saw the radar, this was his observations back there on the 26th of August in 2020. And I want to show it to you because it's really quite fascinating. Laura comes in at Cat 4, 130 mile an hour winds at landfall. But right there, that spot, is what's interesting in the video. So if I take you back, let's just go to here. You'll notice that the observations are still coming from the Lake Charles radar for the hurricane here. But then you'll also pick up that right about there, okay, just watch this, the outer rain bands of the hurricane and the very strong winds, here's the inner eye wall, are approaching. And as the eye wall, the northern edge of it, hits the radar, you're going to watch all of a sudden some clear air echo show up at Houston. And that's because in order to keep the animation going, we had to switch radars. This one was, first of all, offline because of the knockout of power, and then physically damaged. And Laura continued to push on through the area. Now, what was interesting about this hurricane is, as I said, it was a monster. At one point, it had winds over 150 miles an hour, and it produced an incredible amount of flooding throughout parts of Louisiana, some places picking up well over a foot of rainfall as it just raced off to the north. The National Weather Service out of Lake Charles has a great webpage about Hurricane Laura, just to remember how monstrous of a storm system this particular one was. But what my Uber driver kept talking about was like, hey, if we could just get a little bit of rain out of a weak tropical system, he says I wouldn't be too upset about it. And I get it, because so much of this southern region of the United States for the last few weeks has not measured really any precipitation at all where you see those deepest reds. Now, I know that I've been focusing a lot on some other spots like the mid-Atlantic into the Carolinas, also the Midwest, and then the dryness. It's just off the page here that's in parts of the Four Corners states. But it's interesting to think about what the tropics could be doing this time of year, because here we are now, we're 5 to 7 days past the peak of the hurricane season. And if you just look globally around what's going on here, we've got just very interesting things, right? Matt and I've been watching any tropical system that forms over in the Western Pacific. If they recurve and start to make their way, doing this, just getting into the North Pacific flow, that can be very disruptive for North American weather. We know we're watching Mario, the remnants of Mario, work their way into the southwest. I'll come back to that in a second. But this eastward displaced Bermuda High is taking anything like the newly formed Tropical Depression 7 and keeping it out over open ocean. And this is going to be a continual issue, which means we're going to have to start paying attention to the Caribbean, the Bay of Campeche, the Gulf as a possible source region. Now, there is some research that backs us up, and we have to just remember that the work of Philippe Papin here, just talking about how September and especially October and November, you need to watch what's called the Caribbean gyre, or the CAG, as sometimes it's looked at or discussed as. And it's just a hotbed of, tropical thunderstorm development that can brew a system and send it north. And last year, this was Helens' brewing ground, if you will. It kind of came through here, went into Florida, and then made its famous kind of curl through the Appalachian Mountains and back over toward the Mid-South. So is anything like that happening right now? Okay, so let me show you the latest animation from the European ensemble for the next 10 days. It's taking Tropical Depression 7, which is expected to become our next named system, and possibly getting the name Gabrielle, and rolling straight toward Bermuda, but making a hard turn back into open ocean simply because of the displacement of the Bermuda High. Next, do we see anything at all forming down here in the 10-day forecast? And at this particular stage, I don't. I don't see anything in that particular spot. But there are some of the ensemble members that once we get out there into next week, we start to see in this map measuring pressure that there's some tropical low pressure that tries to form. I'm way out there. I'm a full 10 days out in the forecast. There it is. We start to see something forming down here in the Gulf. Now, some of the models have teased out bigger systems, but while that's all happening, I don't know if you notice, if you're looking at other parts of the country, there's a lot of low pressure coming in off the Rockies that moves into the Midwest before this, and we have to discuss those features as well to see if they can tap into a little Gulf moisture and bring some precipitation down here as well. So there's multiple pieces to this right now in the absence of these, as Matt discussed very well yesterday, in the absence of these more big dynamical drivers like a big move in the MJO or something disruptive in the North Pacific or North Atlantic. And instead, the majority of the story is about, well, why is the Bermuda High drifted off and not contributing much to pulling anything into this area to relieve some of the drought. So we just come back to the satellite data from yesterday, and the storm system that is rolling off the coast of North Carolina, Virginia, the models way overdid it on precipitation, especially in North Carolina. Okay, Virginia better, but North Carolina, no. I'll show you that in just a few seconds. But as we just kind of look here at what happened yesterday, it was another day of bigger storms blowing up in the plains. This has been our active corridor. You can see some smoke on the northern side of here, and these isolated but relatively deep storms that are right in through this particular corridor in the atmosphere. And some of them were pretty nasty yesterday, putting out some wind and hail reports. But as I got later into the day, we'll have to come back and look at this in a few moments. We still see the fire smoke here from the Garnett fire, and then we have a new set of fires up in parts of Washington. I got to talk about that in just a moment as well. But total precip, I wanted to have a look at it. Last 72 hours, you can now see the spotty nature of the storms in this area. So you have some folks that picked up much needed rains, but then there's this this often thing that happens here where you look around and you see, my neighbors picked up the rain that I needed because of just how hyper-local the rain was here. Now, that's not the case in Nebraska, parts of South Dakota, North Dakota, where those 22 tornadoes ran north-south in this area. But I just wanted to point out kind of the national distribution of rainfall from the last 72 hours. As I mentioned, the models were much more aggressive on rainfall here that never manifested itself. It just didn't happen. All the heavy rain was much farther to the north, putting more of parts of the Carolina, especially the coastal parts of the Carolinas, deeper into drought, which they've been in for quite some time. The storms were pretty rough, though, in the middle part of the country. Just taking a look here at the national map showing hail for the last 3 days and zooming in, we can see that some of these storms were putting down some pretty large hailstones, doing some damage. And we have a crop here that, because of how quickly it went through its growth stages, is probably pretty vulnerable to late season thunderstorms. I think the stand quality is going to be an issue, which we should talk about as well. I'll get to that in a second. But I want to take you back to the Northwest, because as we watched some of that satellite data yesterday in the Northwest, you can see this deep low off the shore, and it's actually pulling flow in very rapidly in this direction. You can't quite see it yet until the smoke starts to come off of the larger fires. And you can see here, right? See that's getting pulled in this direction. And some of the smoke plumes you see here getting pulled in that direction. But there was something else that was quite interesting that happened here yesterday. And you may have seen this on social media, but I went ahead and grabbed just a quick video of it using the webcam that looks at Mount St. Helens. So just a couple of months after I was born in 1980, this whole part of Mount St. Helens blew. And then yesterday, because of those winds, some of the ash got picked up, and there was some concern that Mount St. Helens was rumbling again. So this is just stepping through yesterday, looking at the ash that was picked up by the stronger winds. And those winds were pretty strong. If you have a look at it here, in fact, let's go full screen now. If you have a look at where those winds were, see that storm system just sucking this in here. So it's an east wind picking up that ash and drawing it out in this direction. And that's just the way the atmosphere's been. It's been very meridional in its flow. You've heard me say that many times, and Matt talked about it the other day. We've got just a whole lot of north-south motion in the atmosphere rather than west to east, which is why the pattern seems to get so stuck and so bland right now. But as you look at the smoke forecast, in fact, let's blow that up just a hair. We are going to continue to watch wildfire smoke here throughout the west. And if there is any action that's low pressure, except for what's off the coast here, it's right in the middle part of the country where we've seen some of those heavier rains as of late. So we need this rain, and we need it to move east. It's hard to get rain to move east when all you have is north-south flow, okay? So there are areas here that over the last 2 weeks have been extremely dry. Last three, in fact, there are some places in the deepest shades of red, especially in my home state of Illinois, that have not measured precipitation in 30, 40, 50 days. And there's other pockets in Kentucky and Tennessee, and I couldn't possibly name them all right now, but you've seen the maps at just how dry things have been in that area. We've been discussing at length, what's going on with the Mississippi, which this morning is approaching 6 feet below low stage, right down here at the tail end of this. This is this late summer drop-off in the river levels as the soil moisture continues to dry out, something we've talked a lot about on the Missouri, the Mississippi, and Ohio basin. We're very dry in the northeast, and even though there was some locally heavy rains here, this was not nearly as widespread in North Carolina as to just relieve the broader drought situation there. So tomorrow morning's new drought monitor is going to be very telling to see how much of an aerial increase they produce, because it's already increased 15% just in the last month alone. So on radar, let's get back into this now. A lot of isolated but heavy rainfall with the most concentrated widespread rain into parts of, mainly focused on Nebraska and surrounding states. And as we think about where this might be going, I was looking at the artificial intelligence forecast, and it is definitely dropping a deep trough more repeatedly through the Gulf of Alaska. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to stagnate things across central parts of North America while also breaking up this what had been a very active jet in the North Atlantic. So what's troublesome about this pattern is we seem to be blocking up here and we seem to be blocking up there as well. So I apologize. My hotel room is very loud this morning. The toilet runs every about 20 minutes and I can't seem to shut off the air handling in the room. So if you hear that buzz in the background, that's what it is. But the only place, let's get back to it now, that's got good flow is here, coming off of Russia, and that's what extends into Alaska, dropping this trough. Now, what I'm curious about, and Matt really did a great job discussing this, is what are we doing with this trough? Is it going to break through and give us that west-east flow? In the near term, no. See how it's going straight through British Columbia as we go through the rest of the day, Wednesday into Thursday? And even though there are, a couple of features here, they're not deep, anchored to cold air type troughs. And as we play it forward, look what happens. By this early next week, we build in another ridge, the trough drops. And I said, all right, it's open, it's better, but it's still got issues with progressing. And it may not do so until the very end of the month. And that's when we start to see the storage of colder air showing up here and the potential for this breaking through. I think that's what we're all going to be looking at, trying to figure this out. So we're just trying to take it piecewise and see what we've got here. And as we've been talking about, a lot of the moisture you've got down here coming to Arizona, California is from the remnants of Mario. Needed that. We have the persistent low pressure system that's sitting here that's trying to drop some rain, more rain, into the central plains. If you take it out 7 days, it looks something like that. The new day 4 through 10, again, another day of this is trying to spread more of that moisture here. But as those deeper troughs show up in the west, we're really bringing in wetter conditions to the Pacific Northwest. I take it out and just show you the 10-day total, and that's what you've got, meaning these areas along the East Coast are going to continue to get drier, except for where you're getting some of the rain from the current I'll call it a tropical hybrid low. I don't know what you want. It's a low pressure system sitting off the coast. But man, this is going to get worse before it gets better. And there's possibilities that parts of the Gulf Coast stay drier too. Sections of the Canadian Prairie miss out on this over the next 10 days. So I want to look at some individual model runs here just to see how much moisture the models are trying to pick up. So playing through the end of the week, the main shows, if you will primarily be to three areas. What's left of this tropical hybrid low, the moisture from Mario, and then the low sitting here. And as we look at it, that's through early Saturday morning, and playing beyond that, I'm just seeing where this begins to move into early next week. And you can see any tropical system is almost off the page because of where the Bermuda high is. And the farther out I go in the model, it's trying to revive moisture late. This is midweek next week. It's trying to revive moisture all the way down to here in Texas, parts of Arkansas, which desperately need rainfall. But I mean, this is so far out in the model run. I mean, we have to just be skeptical when we get out this far. And I look at this, I'm like, I would love nothing more than 2 inches of rain for where I live here in Illinois, or to get over in Indiana and other pockets surrounding this area, like Missouri. Missouri's been beat on with drought this year. And but that's it. What does the GFS say? So let's go ahead and add this one up. GFS has an interesting difference, very similar overall to the European through Sunday. But what I find interesting is what it's attempting to do down in Texas, where I am right now. That's to really drive in a lot of moisture that wasn't in the Euro. As we play it out, is there anything of significance going way out there in the forecast 15 days from a single run? Yeah, the GFS is attempting to make a tropical system here, but I wouldn't count on it. But the model differences, look at this, 0.15. I always pick on my own house, but yeah, that's a huge model spread here. And by the way, if you didn't know this, go to AgWeather, and you can come up here and click on your local forecast. So sorry, where I am in this hotel, the internet's terrible today, so you're not even getting my radar image shown up just yet. Click on local weather, and I'm just going to put in Champaign, Illinois. If I can spell that. Champaign, Illinois. Click on it, click submit so that it gets into the system. And then don't forget, we now stack up the models for you. So look how much wetter the European is versus the GFS right there where I live. So always looking at these model differences stacked up, I think, is very useful to be able to compare. So I just want to remind you of that capability here. All right, so we saw the Euro, we saw the GFS. Let's go look at the national blend of models just as one more point of reference. As I play it out, I see a lot of similarities. Just take note, though, that the NBM has that same signal that the GFS does down here in this part of Texas. I just want to look for something similar and look for some of the differences here. Okay, one other piece to this pattern we have to talk about is wind. As I play it forward, we're just looking for any areas of strong wind through the next, let's call it week to 10 days. Now you can clearly see when the troughs come in west, we're going to get some strong winds. So we have to be prepared for that in some of these basins that tend to get strong winds, or on this side of the Rocky Mountains. Also watch parts of the plains for the risk of strong winds as this pattern continues to evolve. But you can tell the presence of higher pressure down here in the southeast preventing a lot of the stronger winds from getting in there by causing a pressure gradient or a change in pressure. So where that brings me to is the week 2 forecast. Okay, so you can kind of see there's some similarities between the CPC forecast, the European model, and the GFS, with the outlier being the AI model, where it drops that trough down here into the southeast, really increasing precipitation. It's kind of southeast to mid-south, but that AI model needs to be monitored pretty carefully because it has at times picked up on things that other models are missing or are washed out in the ensemble. So I will keep an eye on it, but I'm not holding my breath on this area seeing above average rainfall to start the new month, okay? So from here, let's go have a look at one other aspect to this deep western trough. Yesterday, the Climate Prediction Center issued a slight risk from the 26th through the 28th for heavy snows here in this part of the Rocky Mountains. I went out and looked at several models, and you can start to see some of them picking up on some heavier snows as the deeper trough comes in. But the reality is we know that there's going to be quite a bit more heavy precipitation moving into this area. And as we think it through, some of the longer range models, like you can see the new ECMWF October forecast over here on the left, is keeping this area near normal to possibly wetter than normal. But it's also keeping this area I'm in today very, very dry unless there is some sort of a tropical system that can come through, which means this whole corridor is going to continue to struggle to get moisture, which is why we're going to watch that AI model, which is trying to revive it in this region. But that's your new subseasonal forecast from the European model. It fits quite well with the map that's over here on the right, which is just a historical correlation in October with precipitation anomalies and La Nina, which we know we do have. Tend to be wetter northwest, and have a couple of drier corridors here overall. So we just need to see that maybe that's what the models are latching onto as one of the more dominant drivers. From there, let's talk temperatures. This is our 7-day frost risk. So there are at high elevation here, and then also in parts of northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and northern Maine, where we have the risk of a frost here in the next 7 days. But looking at these max temperatures, where that rain is, we've cooled off the air, but out ahead of it, very hot conditions for this time of year, very hot in parts of the Pacific Northwest. But as we know, that's all going to change for the Northwest once we get that trough in place next week. So that's Saturday's highs. getting into Sunday and Monday. And once we watch the trough start to come in here, things are expected to change. But when you plant a big area of upper level high pressure here, there's no reason for this to go over to anything but mild, very warm for this time of year until that pattern is dislodged. So we're looking for when it might be dislodged. And if you watch, the next 5 days look something like this. Day 5 through 10, as that ridge becomes fully established, a lot of mild air, a lot of warmer than normal conditions here. And then day 10 through 15, right there, is where the west starts to take on that trough and the temperatures begin to drop and that snow risk begins to come into place. I had been a bit ambitious on the pattern into early October, and I'm still not settled on it, but the newest evolution is for that trough to be here more in that 11 to 18 day time frame, which displaces the downstream trough off of the East Coast. Earlier, I thought this trough was going to be back a bit farther, which meant we could back this up, and we would probably have seen not this, but a pattern that did more like that. So I thought we'd get a better cool down in the eastern part of the country, but this seems to be fading as the models get out there and look farther and farther. So speaking of farther and farther, it's just a reminder of a few things. La Nina is still one of our more dominant factors. We've got a lot of very warm water that's in the North Pacific Ocean. Yeah, it's cooled off a little bit here in the last week, but it still is well above historical averages. You slide down and say, well, what is the MJO contributing? It is not. So you see a lot of it just parked here somewhere in the Indian Ocean, but not highly anomalous, making it a very difficult parameter to use for the longer term forecasts. So I just tend to focus on some of these bigger picture things. And you've now seen the October forecast. We know that as we go into fall, we're going to expect to get the models to really hone in on the impacts of La Nina as the forecast driver. But I want to remind you that sub-seasonal things are going to be the bigger key here. So I don't think any of us are really settled on what fall could be. Okay, you saw the October forecast, but I just don't think we're all settled in this. I'm still quite curious about these ocean temperatures here in the North Pacific. So I pulled up again up to last year how warm those ocean temperatures have been. And you can see that, honestly, since what is this? I can hover over it. 2013, we've been very warm since then in that North Pacific area. And again, what I'm talking about is this spot right here. These ocean temperatures have been much, much above average for a while, offsetting that normal PDO signal we can sometimes talk about. I just want to show you again something I put in my report on Monday night, just looking at what this might mean. And all that warm water there, if it's still there by December, it tends to drive our winter temperature patterns like this. And just a point of possibility here that I want you all to consider as we think about maybe where this winter is going to be headed. Now, of course, everybody at this time of year calls for crazy winters, and I am not. Just please don't read that into it. I'm just saying, hey, there tends to be just a correlation when you stack all these years up that had very warm water there. That's all we're doing. So we'll continue to let that evolve. The other thing we have to watch evolve is this. This is an animation. If I can get this playing for you on my terrible internet this morning. There we go. Animation of some of the deeper storms that have been here in Mato Grosso and surrounding states. We also had heavy rain earlier in the last few days down here in southern Brazil as well. But that rain has started to erase some of the deficits that were here, bringing them back closer to normal, leaving the driest parts of Brazil much farther to the east. And if you see some of the new forecasts, they are attempting to bring a front up. Watch this. This is through Friday into Saturday and Sunday. Watch Argentina, which is here, and the front that slides through Paraguay, Uruguay, into southern Brazil into next week. And the European model, you're looking for these precipitation colors until I get my new color bar fully established. That's 2 inches at 50 millimeters, and that's what's being weighted on. And some of the models are even more aggressive than that. Look at this. This is the GFS bringing in that precipitation. It's really trying to load it up in the next 2 weeks. And if this verifies, there's going to be just very rapid planting happening in Brazil with the rains finally coming in. There'll be local flooding, which happens in spring, here as well. But I just want to make a point that we've got to watch that carefully. The new outlook for October from the European model is also just broadly wetter for a large part of South America. And earlier, I know that I had favored the GFS because I just didn't see that model. I didn't see the European model solution panning out. I probably should have given the European more of a nod here if this verifies we have a story that must be watched in South America with their planting progress. They're not going to start releasing some of these reports, though, that they put on the web for a little while. But once they do, I'll be sure to include them in these videos. All right, I'm going to head down to the conference center here in a little bit and talk to those folks about the weather across the world. And I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to getting home late tonight, but we'll talk again on Friday. Matt will pick it up in the morning. Have a good one. Thanks.